Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. Snow had been falling over Maple Hollow since noon, the soft kind that hushes a town and turns every porch into a quiet altar. After the Christmas service, after paper plates and ham at the church hall, after a dozen neighbors pressed leftovers into my hands, because that's what we do here, I slipped away from the chatter and lights. I told Mrs. Rollins I'd be right back. I told the choir director I'd help stack chairs. I told myself this was going to be the best surprise I'd ever pulled off. The Ford Explorer sat behind Dot's Diner, where the plows don't always make it a used clean machine the color of pewter. It wasn't fancy, and Lord knows I'd signed my name more times than I liked to get it, but I'd paid enough cash to sleep at night. My daughter Brooke had talked for months about a reliable SUV for winter showings. Clients hate sliding around subdivisions, she'd said, and every time she said it, my chest hurt the way a stitch hurts when you run. I wanted to be the kind of mother who could step in and make the road less mean. I opened the back door, climbed in, and pulled it shut. The cold glass bit my shoulder blades. I set the small gift box on my lap. The title folded neat, the Cardinals keychain I picked up at the farm supply, a note that said, "For every mile you've still got in you. Love, Mom." I could see my breath in the dark, like a little engine puffing. Somewhere toward Main Street, a train horn dragged itself through the valley. I rubbed my hands together, stilled my nerves, and waited for Brooke to come around the corner so I could spring up grinning and scare 10 years off her life before I hugged the fear back in. Boots on ice, 2 sets. They came down the alley with their heads, close voices hard in the cold. Brooke's coat was the camel one she liked to wear when she wanted to look expensive. Chase had that same too bright smile he used when telling a lie to himself. I shrank lower. If you have ever hidden from your own child, you know it makes you feel both foolish and 15. The locks chirped, doors opened. They climbed in. The dome light flared, then died. My fingers found the seam of the seat and held on. Chase spoke first words clipped like receipts. The lender called again. They want a payment by Friday. If I can't get it, they push us into collections. I'm tapped out. Brooke let out a breath that fogged the windshield. You're not listening. We're sitting on resources. Your mom is sitting on resources, he shot back, not us. Silence stretched, then broke. The house, Brooke said, paid off. The little nest egg she hides in the coffee tin. And there's a policy. We both know that. None of it does any good while it's locked up. Locked up because she's alive, Chapey, she said, and the way he said alive made it sound like a problem to be solved. The heater clicked. Salt cracked under the tires of a truck passing on the street. Brooke's voice went careful, like she was tiptoeing over a creek in heels. I'm not saying anything reckless. I'm saying time isn't on our side. She hasn't been steady on the back steps since the ice storm last year. It wouldn't take much. People her age, it happens. I forgot how to swallow. The leather under my palm went slick. Chase gave a laugh that didn't belong in a church alley. You're actually saying it. I'm saying we can't keep bailing water with thimbles, Brooke said. She doesn't need all that space. She barely drives. She's tired, and we're drowning. Insurance doesn't pay out for tired, he said. Accidents happen, she answered low. Falls happen. You know the statistics better than I do. The money's there. It just needs to move. The word money rattled around the car like a loose bolt. My name was not in that sentence. I noticed that. I listened to 2 people I loved talk about me like a ledger item and learned something about the weather inside them. It was frost. Chase drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. Even if hypothetically we get access, there's still the optics. The town will have opinions. Maple Hollow always has opinions, Brooke said. They had opinions when I wore hand-me-downs and you drove that Civic with the primer door. People forget fast when you pour a new parking lot. He whistled through his teeth, thinking, what about Dean? He's already circling. He'll want a piece. He can want, Brooke said. None of this is his. I pressed the box into my coat so hard the lid dented. My mouth filled with the taste of pennies. A story of years tried to rise up inside me, clocking in before sunrise, mopping aisles at the grocery, adding a second shift when the plant cut hours, buying Brooke a used blazer for her first open house and hemming the sleeves by hand, but the car had no appetite for that kind of thing tonight. It only held the math my child and her husband were doing. Chase's voice softened as if he wanted to prove he could be kind about cruelty. Look, I don't like it either, but if we wait much longer, interest eats us alive. We lose the condo, we lose my clients, and then what was all this for? Brooke made a small sound. Not a sob, not quite. I'm so tired, Chase, she said. I'm tired of counting pennies in the pasta aisle while she sits on a house she doesn't even heat in the bedrooms. The heater fan pitched up. The dome light blinked again when she adjusted the visor. Her profile cut against the glass. It's a particular kind of pain to see your own cheekbones making a case against you. Chase dropped his voice. Then we create an opportunity, something no one questions. That backstep. Don't, Brooke said, but not like a warning, more like a prayer that didn't mind an answer. Footsteps approached the alley mouth and passed. The diner door swung, spilled grease and laughter shut. My heart learned a new tempo, quick and small enough to hide. No one said my name. No one remembered the Cardinals' keychain. Snow began again, dry and whispering, as if the sky wanted to cover what it was hearing. Chase finally sighed. We're agreed. Brooke didn't answer. She didn't have to. The quiet had the shape of agreement. They killed the heater. Opened their doors, stepped out, and the cold fell over me like a sheet. The dome light came up one last time. It washed the car in a pale, soft mercy, showed me my own hands work. Hands cracked and clean and then clicked off. They walked away toward the street, toward the lights on Main, where everything looks honest from far enough away. I stayed until the sound of their boots gave out. I put the box on the floor mat, eased the door open, and let the winter take my face until it went numb. The alley was empty. The Explorer ticked as it cooled. I pulled the Cardinal's key from the ribbon and slipped it into my pocket. I left the note. The snow took my footprints as fast as I made them. I went the long way around the diner so no one would have to ask me how my night was going. Maple Hollow had tucked itself in. Porch lights burned like small brave things. I moved past them, head down, breath sharp, using the kind of quiet that doesn't break when it's dropped. By the time I reached the end of Mill Street, my cheeks were raw and my knees ached and the cold had cleaned me down to bone. I kept walking. The sky over the grain elevator was the color of a bruise. Somewhere a dog barked once and gave up. The world, for a few streets at least, had decided to keep its mouth shut. So did I. I did not look back at the Explorer. I did not look at the church windows still warm with other people's songs. I walked home with my hands in my pockets and the key biting my palm, and I told myself one true thing, the only thing I could stand to hear: I am not a number. Not to me. By morning, the snow had crusted over a thin armor that crackled under boots. I woke before the town and let the percolator talk to itself on the stove. The house smelled like old pine cleaner and coffee, the way January smells when it's trying to pass for a cheerful. I set the Cardinal's key on the table and watched sunlight crawl across it. Metal keeps its own kind of memory. It stays cold longer than you want. I'd slept the kind that slides off you like a bad coat. When the weather report on KMMH said the high would be 22 if we're lucky. I answered the radio without thinking. We're not. Then I turned the volume down because I didn't feel like being told what was likely. Routine is a kind of raft. I washed the percolator, made the bed, wiped the crumbs from the counter I'd already wiped the night before. I laid out my work pants, though I didn't have a shift at the plant till tomorrow. When my hands ran out of chores, I pulled a spiral notebook from the junk drawer, mead blue cover, 80 sheets, and wrote the date. Then I wrote the time from the cracked face of the kitchen clock. Then I wrote what I had heard in the diner alley as straight as I could, the words I could stand to set down. I left out the parts that felt like they would set me on fire to see in ink. The phone buzzed once around 9. Brooke, you left early last night. Everything okay? No heart emoji, no extra question mark. The punctuation of courtesy. I stared until the letters blurred. My thumbs typed, all good. Church wore me out. I deleted church and put evening. I deleted wore me out and put was long. I deleted that and sent fine, thanks. She responded with a thumbs up so small it might have been dust. I dressed warm and walked to Main. Maple Hollow, the day after Christmas, looks like somebody pressed pause, the wreaths droop. The baker naps in his chair and Mrs. Burgess writes 50% off tinsel on a chalkboard, even though no one has ever paid full price for tinsel here. Outside the hardware store, Dean and Trish were arguing about rock salt, like it was a moral question. Trish saw me first and put on her nice voice, the one she uses at funerals. Well, if it isn't my favorite sister-in-law, she sang as if there were a line of us, and I wasn't the only one. Ruth, honey, how's your hip with all this ice? Still attached, I said. Dean clapped my shoulder like men do when they want you to forget something. Saw your porch light on at 5. You're up before the chickens. Chickens don't have a radio, I said. His grin twitched. He got to the point so fast he almost tripped over it. Listen, with costs going the way they are, Trish and me were thinking now. Don't bite my head off. Maybe it's time to look at that place of yours. Square footage like that doesn't sit empty. We could help you move closer to town. Could even take care of the sale for you. Keep it in the family. It's 11 blocks to town, I said. Trish's mouth pinched. You know what we mean. You got rooms you don't heat. You got equity just standing there under snow. Lord knows Brooke has her hands full, and Brooke's hands are Brooke's, I said. Mine work fine. Dean lifted his palms like he'd surrendered. Hey, now nobody's gunning for your memories. We're just talking options. Be ashamed to see it all go to taxes and probate and whatnot. He said the last word like he'd just learned it and wanted to see how it fit. I thought of Chase saying, locked up because she's alive, and decided the sidewalk was as far as I'd let that sentence walk. Appreciate your concern, I said. I'll holler if I need a realtor. They looked at each other, then at me, then at the sidewalk salt, like it had done something wrong. Trish swatted Dean's sleeve, and they moved along arguing again about whether you need the blue bag or the white. Dot's diner was half full. The cook waved with his spatula. Teenagers in Letterman jackets crowded a corner booth and practiced being loud. I ordered a cup of coffee that tasted like the bottom of a boot and was exactly what I wanted. Mrs. Alvarez blew in with the wind in a scarf knit so tight it could have been a bandage. She used to be an ER nurse until the night shift started asking more than her knees could give. We share a fence and a taste for the same brand of pickles. You look peaked, she said, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. Don't say you're fine. You look like a person who woke up standing. I slept, I said. That's not what I said. She shrugged off the scarf, signaled for tea. Church good? Loud, I said. She studied me. A nurse can take your pulse without touching your wrist. You want to talk here? No, I said. I want to talk where the ketchup isn't staring at me. We walked the length of Main after I paid. The wind came sideways around the feed store. Mrs. Alvarez leaned into it like it was an argument she could win. At her gate, she paused. Inside or backyard? Backyard, I said. Her patio furniture was the kind that lasts metal lattice with the paint flaking off like a map. She poured tea from a thermos and handed me a mug shaped like a cow that had seen some things. I told her what I'd done in the alley, why I'd done it, what I heard when I held my breath. I did not use the word accident. I did not say backstep. I told her the part about the money like it was just numbers. That's how they'd said it, so that's how I put it down. She closed her eyes once and opened them slow. I don't like any of that. I don't either. She pinched the bridge of her nose, then looked at my boots. Don't climb anything you can't jump off. Keep the back walk salted, even if you're not going to use it. Check your smoke detectors because I'm nosy. Change your route to the store. If you hear a knock, you're not expecting call me first. That's me not panicking, by the way. I know the difference, I said. She nodded toward my house. You write any of it down. In the blue spiral, I said. Good. Date and time. Stick to what you heard, not what you felt. Feelings are real and useless at the same time when you need people to listen. A pair of cardinals hop-skipped along the fence line. The male looked like he had been painted by a kid in a hurry. I remembered the key in my pocket and pressed it, a little proof of something that had been meant to be joy. Mrs. Alvarez poured more tea. You going to call Brooke? I already answered her text. That wasn't my question. I know. I wrapped both hands around the cow mug. If I hear my own voice say it out loud to her, I don't know what my feet would do. Then don't, she said. Not yet. We sat quiet long enough to hear the freight train miles off. She reached over and patted my forearm. Her hands are small and certain. I'll keep my porch light on. I went back through the alley behind the houses where the trash cans sit like old soldiers. The sun had slicked the top layer of snow to slush. When I reached my kitchen door, I stopped and looked at the 3 back steps. The lowest one tilts a hair to the left, where the clay sank a fact you don't notice until you fall. I'd warned Brooke a dozen times growing up to take it slow. I looked at it now until the shape of it stopped being a step and turned into a simple piece of wood that could mind its business if people would let it. Inside, the kitchen had cooled. I turned the oven on low to take the edge off and pulled the blue spiral from the drawer. I added the talk with Dean and Trish the time the sidewalk, the brand of salt, not because the brand mattered, but because details make a thing hold still. I stapled the church bulletin over the page where I'd written what I heard last night. Not to hide it, just to keep it from rubbing against anything else. Afternoon thinned out like weak soup. I walked to the VFW to ask about the coat drive bin. The logo was peeling, so I taped it down. A kid I didn't know called me ma'am in a way that wasn't trying to make me small. The bowling alley opened early for winter break, so I stopped in to warm up. The lanes hummed and the rental shoes smelled exactly like rental shoes. I nursed a soda and minded my business. You can hear a lot at the far end of a bar without trying. 2 men in construction hoodies were laying out gossip like 2x4s. Somebody's cousin got picked up for taking copper pipe from a foreclosed place. The new subdivision delayed because the soil tests flunked a condo association downtown posting late notices. They said Chase's name once. They didn't say it like a friend. That was enough. On my way out, I caught my reflection in the glass of the trophy case. The woman there had my coat and my hair and my mouth set in the shape it makes when I don't want my jaw to shake. I gave her a nod and kept moving. Evening came down hard and early. I stopped at the grocer for milk and a box of the good crackers because there is no point in pretending the cheap ones are the same. At the register, Mr. Harlan asked if I'd enjoyed the service, and I said yes, because parts of it had been true. He bagged the milk light like it was a baby. At home, the heat clicked and the baseboards ticked along. I salted the back walk, though I had no intention of using it. I locked the doors out of habit and then unlocked and relocked them because habit wasn't enough for once. I turned off the kitchen light and the room went watercolor dark. The window glass held a tall version of me for a second and then handed me back to the room. I put the Cardinal's key in the sugar bowl, not because it was clever, but because I knew I would look there first in the morning. I slid the blue spiral under the phone book. I sat down, set my hands flat on the table, and counted my own breaths until they matched the clock. The house settled like an old dog. The pipes clinked. Somewhere on Mill Street, a car door thudded and a man laughed and a woman said something he didn't hear. I didn't call anyone. I didn't argue with the empty chairs. I listened to the heat and let it be a promise it could keep. When the last of the daylight let go, I stood, checked the stove twice, and went down the hall slowly, keeping my palm on the wall to feel the studs under plaster, the bones of a place that it held. Night pressed down like a lid. The house held its breath the way old places do when the wind comes from the river. I lay awake and counted the pipes ticking until the numbers quit helping. Somewhere after midnight, the quiet changed. It had the shape of a decision, even if it didn't have a speech to go with it. The porch light from Mrs. Alvarez's place cut a clean wedge through the dark between our yards. I pulled on my coat and opened the back door. The cold found my wrists. She stepped onto her stoop with a blanket over her shoulders and that steady way she has of standing like a person who knows how to count to 10 and then start again if she has to. We didn't wave, we didn't need to. I crossed the snow careful on the tilt of the lowest step because habit is its own kind of prayer. What happened after that was simple, not technical. A chair pulled out, water poured, a hand on my shoulder when mine shook more than I liked. The kind of hush that happens in hospital hallways and Sunday school rooms right before something breaks or mends. Then, the sirens, a long, tired sound that turned our little street into a red-blue aquarium. Steel toes on my floorboards. A flashlight cutting a stripe across the ceiling. Voices trading numbers in a quick workman way. Someone said time of death and the words were so clean you could eat off them. They laid a sheet like snow over me. Fabric has a weight you don't notice until it takes your face. I kept my body quiet the way you keep a secret everywhere at once. I listened to the zipper of the bag they didn't need. I listened to Mrs. Alvarez's voice come apart just enough and stay together where it counted. She went down so fast, she said. She was there and then she wasn't. People in uniforms know when to argue and when to write. They wrote. By mid-morning, the house had the stillness of a stage after the curtain closes. I was not there to hear the neighbors lower their voices. I was not there when the church ladies stacked paper plates on my counter like they were little shields. Mrs. Alvarez's spare room had a quilt with bright triangles and a window that looked at the top of my pine. She made toast I didn't want and set it on the dresser for later, like a small promise that someone in the world still knew how to be kind without asking for anything in return. The doorbell camera on my front porch sent a picture to the old tablet she plugged in for me. Noon light, Brooke on the steps in the camel coat. Her hair had the exact part she used to practice in my bathroom mirror with a comb and a mouthful of bobby pins. She held herself taller than usual the way people do when they have to walk through a door they don't like. She unlocked the deadbolt with the spare I'd always said was hers anyway. The living room did not look surprised to see her. Chase came in behind a phone already at his ear. He didn't take his boots off. He never has patience for laces. He stood at the kitchen counter where I keep the sugar bowl and spoke in that brisk customer service tone he saves for people who can say yes to him. Yes, this is Mr. Warner. I'm calling to confirm a policy. Beneficiary Brooke Keller. Primary. I can provide the certificate number. He recited it. He had it ready. He paced. I understand timelines. I'm asking about expediting. The line at his jaw jumped when the person on the other end said a word like procedure. Sure, he said. Of course. I'll email the documents today. He ended the call and looked around my kitchen like it had volunteered to help and then didn't. Brooke moved with a list in her head. She opened the desk drawer and took out the envelope I'd labeled with a black Sharpie years ago because names soothe paper tax title insurance. She set the stack on the table and squared its corners. She didn't sit. She dialed. This is Brooke with Cedar Ridge Realty, she said. I've got a single-story off-mill with good bones and a deep lot. No updates. As is, we're open to cash offers. She paused. Quick timeline preferred. A nod. I'll send photos tonight. She didn't look at the framed ones on the wall. She moved from lamp to lamp, clicking them on like she was staging the room for a showing. Light made everything honest in the way a measuring tape is honest. The next picture the tablet sent me was Trish's coat in the doorway, a red wool one from the store with the good coupons. Dean followed, breath making steam. They stepped inside, took in the lamps, and then took in me not being there. Grief has a lot of shapes. Theirs came out as a sweep of the eye and a tightening of the mouth, and then a quick pivot toward the places where people keep important things. Dean went for the corner cabinet and tried to act like it was his idea to check the hinges. Trish drifted to the hall like a bloodhound that had to pretend to be a lady. "Brooke, sweetheart," Trish said. "We came as soon as we heard. Lord have mercy, this is—" She let the sentence trail off and found another one. "If there's paperwork, this is the moment. It all goes sideways if you let it sit." Brooke kept her voice even. "I've got it." Dean bent to the baseboard where the safe lives, the one I use for nothing more dangerous than passports and a picture of Brooke's first day with a gap in her teeth. He tapped it with his knuckle like it could answer. "Code?" he asked, already reaching like a man who expects to be rewarded for the question. Brooke didn't give it to him. She stepped in and opened a different door, the broom closet where I keep what I really don't trust, the coffee tin under the shelf where the rags are. She lifted it with both hands and set it on the table the way you carry a sleeping baby when you're afraid to wake it. She took off the lid and looked at what a person collects in case the world forgets her, a handful of bills for the plumber who only takes cash. A love note from a husband gone 30 years, a key that no longer fits any lock. Trish peered over her shoulder. "That it?" Brooke's face didn't move. "It's something." Dean tried another angle. "Your mom would want you to lean on us. Family ought to help each other carry heavy." He said help like he meant claim. Chase cut in from the kitchen, not lifting his eyes from his phone. "The insurance is the piece that matters. The house will go. The policy clears debt. Timing is key." He said debt like he was reading from a manual. Brooke put the lid back on the tin and held it a second longer than she needed to. "I'll handle it," she said. She didn't look at any of them when she did. The tablet fed me more stills as the day unspooled. The realtor's lockbox on my doorknob bright as a cuff. Trish folding my Afghan and setting it in a plastic bin that says Christmas, though I use it for extra blankets. Dean squinting at a light fixture as if a dead bulb owed him money. Chase's thumb moving fast over a screen. Brooke walking room to room with her camera uplining, shots catching the north light in the bedroom and the way the hallway makes the rooms look longer than they are. She paused once at the photo of us on the fairgrounds Ferris wheel a summer evening when the sky remembered how to be orange. Her mouth tried to become something and then chose not to. Around 3, the answering machine grabbed a call and made it into a square of sound. I listened in Mrs. Alvarez's spare room with the cow mug between my palms, even though the tea was long gone. "Mom," Brooke said to the tone. Her voice came slow like each word cost. They said it was quick." Paper rustled. She took a breath that had to find its way around a lot of sharp pieces. "I'm taking care of things. I know where everything is. I know what you kept where. Dean and Trish are here. Chase is calling who he needs to call." Another pause. "You didn't leave instructions for the things that don't fit in a file. I'm using my best judgment." She swallowed. "You would have told me not to make a fuss, so I won't." She hung up without the extra words people put on the ends of sentences when they want to be forgiven. The machine blinked its red number 1 like a little heart that didn't believe in metaphors. Late light rinsed the street in pale gold. A realtor's SUV idled at the curb. Footprints crowded my front walk the way they do during rummage sales. In the tablet window, my living room made itself small to accommodate other people's plans. I opened the blue spiral and wrote the times like a clerk. Noon, Brooke enters. 12:12. Chase call policy confirmation expedite. 12:30 phone to Cedar Ridge. 1:04 Dean and Trish arrive. Coffee tin, broom closet, help carry heavy. 2:19 photos of north bedroom. 3:07 Brooke to machine. Using my best judgment. I stopped there and left the pen on top of the page so the ink could breathe. Mrs. Alvarez set a plate beside the notebook. The toast warmed again until it remembered what bread is for. "Eat something," she said, not because she's bossy, but because she has lived long enough to know hunger turns decisions crooked. I took a bite and let it sit there soft and simple. Outside, the ambulance tracks had already blurred into gray. A kid on a bike coasted down Mill with his hat too big and his mouth open to the cold. The day made room for evening as if they had always planned to meet in the middle. The tablet chimed one last time, a text forwarded by some polite failure of settings. Chase to Brooke, 3 sentences clean as the edge of a card. Policy will release after documentation. Condo bought us a month. We're fine if everything moves. The word fine thudded. It didn't mean what it used to. I put the plate on the dresser and stood at the window where the pine needles hold snow like a choir holds a note. My chest lifted and fell until the room partnered with it. The blue spiral lay open on the bedspread, ink drying dark. The porch light across the yard stayed on steady as a metronome. The house on Mill Street settled into the kind of quiet that can hear a clock, a car door. Far off, a voice on a machine saying a name that belongs to you. The next day, the town put on its best flannel. The VFW hall smelled like coffee that had been honest about itself and floor wax that had met better years. A flag hung square behind the little plywood stage. Folding chairs lined up in rows the way corn lines up before a storm. Mrs. Alvarez parked close and walked me to the side door, one hand at my elbow the way you steady someone without letting them notice. Inside, a woman with headphones and ink on her fingers looked up from a folding table crowded with cables. "Ruth," she said as if we'd met once in a different story. "Avery Cole." Her voice had the low steadiness of someone who records things so they can't run away. I nodded and set this blue spiral on the table. The cover was scuffed from hiding under the phone book. "You'll want Times," I said. "I like Times," she answered. She clipped a small mic to my collar and looked me in the eye for a count that wasn't about seconds. "We'll stay with what you've got, not what anybody wishes was there." People shuttled in with the cold on their coats. Dot from the diner, Mr. Harlan from the grocer, the bowling alley manager in a shirt with his name chain-stitched. Dean and Trish took a middle row and kept their jackets on, like they were ready to leave or ready to be asked to. Brooke came last camel, coat hair neat, a thin line tight across her mouth. Chase followed, phone already up and bright. Avery had billed the evening as a community conversation about elder care and paperwork, which is exactly the kind of phrase that gets a town to show up and not feel nosy. The room settled. The coffee urn hissed. Avery stood by the podium and tested the mic. "Prairie Truth is live from Maple Hollow," she said, eyes moving across faces like a sweep of headlights on a gravel road. "If you're here, you know Ruth Keller. You've bought her pies at the church auction. She bagged your groceries when the high school kids didn't show. You've all stood behind her in a line somewhere." A small laugh pulled itself together near the back. Avery let it pass and went on. "We're talking today about what happens to a person's life on paper when the person isn't there to speak. We're talking about conversations that feel like accounting when they ought to feel like family." She reached for a small recorder and pressed a button. "We're going to play a few clips. They were recorded in Ruth's home and on her answering machine. We have permission." The first clip was nothing more than efficient words in my kitchen. "Yes, this is Mr. Warner. I understand timelines. Expedite." Chase didn't shift. He stared straight ahead as if the wall might tell him the ending first. The second clip was shorter. My own machine beeping, then Brooke's voice laid careful on top of it. "I'm taking care of things. I know where everything is. I'm using my best judgment." The room did the thing a room does when it remembers how to breathe together. Chairs creaked, a handkerchief moved. Dean looked at the floor as if that might help his mouth decide what to do. Avery kept her voice level. "We'll do one more." A doorbell cam caught sound before it caught picture, the hollow echo of boots on my front walk. Then the image, Brooke with her camera up, measuring the light the way agents do when they need a room to look like a promise. "Off-screen Chase policy will release after documentation. Condo bought us a month. We're fine if everything moves." The word fine hung there on the hall PA like it wanted to mean itself and didn't. Avery let the quiet sit. When she spoke again, she didn't turn toward me. She turned toward the crowd. "There's nothing illegal about a phone call. There's nothing illegal about a photo for a listing. The question we're interested in is whether we have learned to talk about people like assets that happen to breathe." She put the recorder down and looked at Brooke the way a teacher looks at a student who could still pick a different answer. Brooke raised her chin. "Is there a reason my family's grief is a broadcast?" "You're under no obligation to comment," Avery said, and her mouth offered a little room if Brooke wanted it. "We invited you as a courtesy." Chase stood. "This feels like a setup," he said. "We're dealing with private matters. If you've got an issue, take it to an attorney, not a microphone." Mrs. Alvarez rose from the front row. She didn't ask Avery. She looked at Brooke and made her words gentle without letting them be small. "I sat with your mama a lot of nights," she said, "when she was tired, when she was counting nickels with her finger on the table so they wouldn't roll. I know what private matters look like. They don't look like this." Avery's hand hovered toward me, a quiet question. I stepped forward because the room had made itself a place where I could stand. The hum of the amp rubbed the bottoms of my teeth. I didn't need the mic, but it needed me, so I took it. "Brooke," I said. My voice came out steady enough to carry to the last row. "We don't have to agree on the weather. We do have to call things by their names." Something in her face sagged and then fixed itself. "You're—" Her eyes watered and then anger dried them. "How—" "Alive," I said. In the second row, someone gasped, the way back doors gasp when springs are tired. Chase's mouth made a tight oval and then returned to its position like a toy snapping back to its place in the box. Dean swore under his breath, and the word he chose sounded enormous in a room where veterans have told stories. The deputy from the county, who had taken a chair near the coffee maker like a man who knows how not to be distracting, stood and showed his badge without the flourish TV gives it. "We're here because the station asked us to be present," he said. "If anyone has evidence of attempted financial exploitation, we can take a statement. If not, you can go home when we're done with the coffee." I opened the blue spiral and laid it next to the recorder. Times I said. Dates. Who said what to whom on which day. That's what I've got. Avery didn't touch the notebook. She nodded at it like you nod at a person who showed up on time and did the thing asked. Thank you, she said to me, and then turned to the room again. We're not a court. We're a microphone and a table and some chairs on linoleum. We're just making sure people hear the same sentence at the same time. Brooke pushed past the aisle and came closer as far as the front row, as if there were a tape line the town had painted years ago that she remembered. This is madness, she said. You're humiliating us. Humiliation is when somebody takes something from you, I said. I'm not taking anything. I'm returning something to the air where it can't be misfiled. You can say what you like into it. She looked at the mic. She looked at me. For a second, the girl who used to bring me crayon drawings to put on the fridge stepped forward and tugged at her sleeve. Then Chase's hand closed around her elbow and the girl backed away. Let's leave, he said. He glanced at the deputy. Unless you're arresting someone, we're done. Mr. Harlan spoke from his seat near the aisle like a man ordering lunch. You can leave, son. The rest of us are listening. Heads nodded. It's a small thing when a room nods, but it shifts the weight. Dean stood, hands out. We're making a mess in public. There's a will to read. There's a way to do this without turning it into a circus. There's no will, I said. Just a house with dust in the corners and a sugar bowl with a key in it. You all can stop looking for a script. Trish pressed her lips thin. Then what are we doing here, Ruth? We're standing where I can hear myself, I said. Afterward, you can stand wherever you choose. Avery lifted her hand again, a conductor smalling a crowd. We're going to take 2 minutes, she told the room. Stretch your legs. Thank the volunteer who brought pie. Then we'll close the hour. She leaned toward me. You need a breath. I've got one, I said. I stepped off the plywood to the side door. The hallway smelled like mop water and cigarettes from a decade ago. Mrs. Alvarez followed and put a box of tissues near my hand without putting it in it. You're holding, she said. It's not the heavy kind, I said. Just steady. Brooke came through the doorway like a weather change. She stopped when she saw there wasn't an audience and rearranged her face into something less public. The camel coat looked wrong in the yellow hall light. You planned this, she said. No question in it. I did what I had to do to stay standing. The words were dull in my mouth, not because they weren't true, but because they had been said too long in my head already. She stared past me at a bulletin board with a faded flyer for a fish fry. You could have called me. I heard enough to know a call wouldn't land. Color rose under her makeup, that quick flood that happens when a person's body tells the truth before their mouth decides to. I was scared, she said, quiet. That's not an excuse, it's a fact. I know facts, I said. I wrote them down. I gestured toward the stage. They're sitting on that table with the coffee cups. She shook her head as if trying to dislodge a word. You made me the villain, she said. I didn't make you anything, I said. I set a light on a floor, and whatever walked over it drew its own outline. Chase's footsteps came quick behind her. He stopped when he saw me and checked the doorway for eavesdroppers out of habit. We don't owe you a public performance, he said to me, and then lower to Brooke. We should go. Brooke didn't move. She looked at my collar, at the mic clip there, at the little green light, alive as a cricket. She lifted her eyes to mine like she was trying to see through something thick. You could have told me about the key and the sugar, she said. You could have asked, I said. Avery leaned into the hall. We're back in 30, she said, as if we were all the kind of people who made broadcasts on purpose. She glanced at Brooke the way a medic glances, checking for the kind of bleeding they can do something about. We'll be brief. We returned to the stage and the room put itself in order. People settled, cups were set down, jackets whispered. Avery closed the hour without speeches. Maple Hollow knows how to carry, she said. Carry right now by letting the people who need to talk do it, and letting the people who need to sit. We'll publish the audio for those who couldn't be here. She thanked the hall, thanked the volunteers, thanked the coffee. I unclipped the mic and set it next to the recorder. The deputy asked for the spiral with a careful hand and promised to copy it and bring it back. The room thinned the way rooms do when the lights get tired. Chairs scraped. The flag didn't move. In the doorway, Dot hugged me with a fierceness that didn't require permission. You come by, she said. I'll pour fresh. Outside, the air had the crispness you get after a snow decides to hold. The lot lights made halos on the ice. The world sounded like tires on packed crust and a far-off dog who believed in the worth of saying something. Mrs. Alvarez tucked her arm through mine. Home, she asked. Home, I said, and the word landed where it needed to, not soft, not sharp, just true enough to walk on. The night after the VFW, I slept through until the furnace clicked itself quiet. Morning came in clean and square through the blinds. I made coffee and didn't touch the blue spiral. The deputy had called just after dawn. He'd copied what he needed and would drop it back by supper. His voice had that practical mercy you get from people who have seen enough not to decorate sentences. Mrs. Alvarez knocked once and came in with a paper sack. Grapefruit, she said. Neighbor kid's granddad ships them up from Texas. We stood at the counter and sectioned one like two surgeons who prefer citrus. The knife knocked against the plate. Juice ran down my wrist. She watched my face the way a friend watches a pot on the stove so it doesn't boil over. "Are you going to Dot's?" she asked. "I am," I said. Dot poured from a fresh pot and set a second cup for no one in particular, the way people do when they want to make space for whatever might come through the door. She didn't ask questions. She topped off cups around the room like she was patching holes. When I left, she slipped a slice of pie into a paper clamshell and put it in my hand without looking me in the eye. "For later," she said, which can mean anything you need it to. The house on Mill Street felt new and old at the same time. I walked it room by room and put my hand on things the way you pat a dog to say you see it. The Afghan was back on the couch, the lockbox was gone, the doorknob wore its old brass like a comfortable ring. I opened the broom closet and lifted the coffee tin. The money smelled like linen and winter. I put the lid back on and set it where it belonged. Brooke came in the afternoon alone. She had my spare key on a ring with a leather tag that said Cedar Ridge in stamped letters. She held it up. "I figured this was yours." "It was always yours too," I said. We stood in the kitchen, both of us looking at the sugar bowl. Sun made a square on the floor. The house waited. "I don't know the right sentence," she said. "Then say a wrong one and we'll see if it holds," I said. Her mouth twitched like it was deciding which direction to go. "I'm embarrassed," she said. "I'm angry. I'm tired. I know none of those are the sentence you want." "I didn't bring a sentence list," I said. I took the key and set it on the counter. "Do you need anything from here?" She glanced at the fridge photos, at the Ferris wheel, at the picture where a gap-toothed kid held a goldfish in a bag like a lantern. "Just my breath back," she said, soft, and then shook her head as if to clear her own weather. "I'll box the paperwork copies for you." I told Cedar Ridge to stop the listing. "Thank you," I said. She nodded, walked to the hall, and then paused, fingers on the door jamb like you touch a good luck charm. "The girls from church asked about you," she said. "I told them you were staying with a friend." "That's accurate," I said. At dusk, a real estate truck slowed at the curb and then kept going as if the driver remembered an errand somewhere else. Two high schoolers shoveled my walk in lopsided rows and refused the $10 bill with the complicated pride of boys. I tucked it into the pocket of the shorter one's coat anyway. "Falls are for people who don't own shovels," I said. He grinned and promised nothing. Days folded. Maple Hollow has a way of carrying a thing until it turns into a different thing. Avery dropped off an SD card with the audio and a note in tidy handwriting, "For your records if you want any." The deputy returned the spiral and a copy stamped with a number. He didn't stay. He had other doors to knock. Dean and Trish drove past once in a car I didn't recognize. They didn't stop. The town returned to errands and arguments and coupons, which is what towns are for. In January, I met a couple in their 30s on the front walk, a teacher and a line cook with a daughter who counted the icicles like candles. The girl wore a pink hat with ears that popped up when she laughed. They touched the doorframes with the same careful hands you use in thrift stores. "It feels like it's been loved," the teacher said. "People who say that are the ones who should have a house." We closed before the thaw. The day we signed the courthouse smelled like dust and lemon oil. Pens clicked, pages turned. The clerk slid a manila envelope across to me and I slid it into my bag. Outside, the wind pushed grit along the curb in fast little rivers. I walked the long way to the diner and didn't count the blocks. When I sat, Dot topped my coffee and set down a second fork without comment. Mrs. Alvarez arrived without having been called. "What are you going to do with the Afghan?" she asked. "Give it to the girl with the pink hat," I said. "It knows how to keep knees warm." The envelope on the booth seat felt heavy and true. Money is loud when it wants to be. This felt like a firm hand on the shoulder, not a shout. I took a breath that went all the way down and came back up with its own 2 feet. There's a church basement at the edge of town that stays warm even when the parking lot doesn't. We put tables there on Saturdays, loaner strollers, winter coats, stacks of diapers, gas cards folded into envelopes with no names. People brought what they could and left with what they needed, and nobody kept tally in ink. Someone hung a handwritten sign near the coffee urn Robert Keller room. The letters leaned a little. The tape crinkled. It looked right. In April, when the ground let go of its hardness, we turned over a rectangle behind the community center. The soil had worms and attitude. A boy from the baseball team hauled in compost like it was a warm-up drill. We planted tomatoes and pole beans on a trellis made from old ladder rungs. Someone donated a rain barrel. Someone else painted it blue. The first Saturday, the kids showed up with plastic watering cans. A girl with 2 tight braids handed me a daisy and then ran after her brother. The stem was short from being grabbed too soon. I tucked it behind my ear until it wilted into a curl. Brooke came by once in the spring, no coat hair. loose face bare in the unflattering honesty of daylight. She stood at the edge of the garden plot and watched a class of toddlers chase bubbles until they forgot what the chasing had been for. We didn't talk long. She pressed a folded check into my palm, the way people in church pass a note down a pew. "No name on it," she said. "Use it where the math doesn't add up. I didn't unfold it there. I didn't need to." Later, at her car, she looked over the roof at me. "Do you still carry your keys in the sugar bowl?" "No," I said. "I keep them in my pocket." "Good," she said, and drove off as if the road ahead didn't require deciding anything more than whether to turn left or right. On Sundays, I sit 2 pews from the back by the aisle in case anyone needs to slide out. Sometimes Avery's podcast comes up on the Fellowship Hall TV when someone tries to stream the basketball game and hits the wrong button. People make a face and then listen anyway. The deputy waves when he sees me at the post office and doesn't mention paperwork. Doc gives me half a sandwich when a whole one would admit too much. At home, the new one with Southlight that pretends to be summer even in February. I keep the blue spiral on a shelf with the cookbooks. The cover is bent. The pages smell faintly of coffee. It's not for writing anymore. It's for proof that a person can put their name on something and have the name stay. The cardinal's key hangs on a nail by the door, a small shine that catches the afternoon. When the garden's first tomatoes come in, the kids bite them like apples and lean forward so the juice doesn't stain their shirts. Laughter travels different outdoors. It lifts and takes what it needs with it. I stand with my hands in the dirt, watching the plants climb whatever they're given, and I let the quiet be what it is, room enough for breath, room enough for names, room enough for a life that holds. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.